It is generally agreed upon that the studio was climbing its magnum opus during the early 1990s with films like The Little Mermaid, Beauty and the Beast, Aladdin, and The Lion King in many ways. Each film was breaking box office records, winning awards, albums charting the Billboard 100, critical acclaim, strong characters to look up to, Disney re-establishing themselves into pop culture once again, and a lot of accolades and profits entering the studio. The executives were happy, the animators were finally able to express their creativity freely, and it was just a good time. And then things went south. In order to really study when things went down, we need to look at the date and when certain films were in production. Pocahontas was released on June of 1995, and as we all know, it was a critical failure. Soon enough, merchandise for the film was pulled, and the reception of the film has not improved 2 decades later. Many blame this film for the failure of Disney up until the 2010s, but while I understand the sentiments, we need to look a bit deeper. The film started pre-production in 1990, while other films were being worked on at the time. Aladdin was finishing production, as the revamped version took 2 years to make, and The Lion King was in the same level as Pocahontas. The former was seen as the B project, while the latter was seen as the A project. Most of the top workers were working on Pocahontas. The downfall of the Disney Renaissance is concerned. A lot of other factors are thrown around. The first point that is often made is that the death of Frank Wells is one of the main reasons why the Renaissance fell apart. In my opinion, I think it had more of an effect on the post-Renaissance than the actual Renaissance period. Frank Wells passed away in a helicopter crash on April 3, 1994. He was cited as being the middleman between Michael Eisner and Jeffrey Katzenberg, and after his death, there was a lot of political turmoil about who had the bigger ego within the company over his CEO and president job, causing Katzenberg to leave the company in September of 1994. It is easy to see that these events had a huge impact on Pocahontas, since it happened after The Lion King was released and before Pocahontas was released. The main problem with this, though, is that Pocahontas was done production already, Hunchback was well into production, and the movies Hercules and Mulan started production earlier that year. Many of the issues with the story elements in these films were already made when those other events occurred. The only film that could potentially see that had significant impact on these events is Tarzan. In the early 90s, when these films were in production, the studio executives brought a lot of Broadway personnel to implement the structure of Broadway into their films. Remember that this took place in the early 1990s, when Pocahontas and Hunchback were in production. Apparently, the directors of Hunchback were told by Katzenberg himself to drop the storyboards from The Lion King to work on Hunchback. All 3 of those films were the main priorities at Burbank Studios in the early to mid-90s. All of them were being seen as these epic stories with a lot of drama. As you can see, the bigger the better. Changes were being made to Pocahontas and Hunchback for political and religious correctness, and executive meddling in both films were said to be extremely high and rampant. They were paying a lot of attention to what people were saying about the early Renaissance films. Like how films Aladdin, Beauty and the Beast, and The Little Mermaid had little to no monthly input, which they emphasized in Pocahontas. As you can see, all 3 executives had their inputs in both films. Before I get lost too deep in my ramblings, I need to bring up the third point that people cite as the end of the Renaissance, which is the death of Harold Ashman in March of 1991. Not only was he the lyricist of The Little Mermaid and Beauty and the Beast, he was also the uncredited director. His opinions and thoughts ended up changing a lot of what came to be in those films that we know and love today. I am personally kind of 50-50 on this because he did have a big influence on those films and many of the efforts he put into Aladdin, but at the same time, a lot of the efforts he put into Aladdin was removed from the film altogether after his death. Apparently he was going to work on Pocahontas after Aladdin, since it just started production a bit before his death, and if he did stay alive for a few more years, he might have ended up working on Hunchback, since it was mostly the same crew who worked on Beauty and the Beast working on that film. His input could have easily changed a majority of what is Pocahontas and Hunchback that we know today, and these films could have been the magnum opus of Disney. But that's a huge if. Seeing that The Boyish The Lion King was becoming a huge success, duo Clement and Musker, who finished Aladdin a few years prior, wanted to work on a film called Treasure Planet, which they have been trying to get off the ground since the mid-1980s. They were working on this for all of 1993, and at the same time, there was a little Greek film that was being in the works called The Odyssey, which was rejected. The initial draft for what became Hercules was being slowly worked on in 1993, but the story took place in the Trojan War, and both sides were to seek Hercules for the secret weapon. Hercules makes a rash choice and has to make up for it. As you can see, this is a completely different draft from the final one that we have come to know. Katzenberg had his hand in this one where he told them that Treasure Planet was on hold and that they had to work on Hercules first. Things kicked off in early 1984, and then after countless meetings, they decided not to base off of ancient history whatsoever. Clements and Musker then wanted to incorporate Michael Jordan in the film, considering Hercules being the Jordan of that time when it comes to celebrity, and to take some inspiration from the popular Superman and Rocky Balboa, since there were such cool studs that everyone wanted to so be like, and every girl wanted to like totally be with. Gotta get that marketability up, right? Right? This is a personal theory of mine that I'm about to explain, and not based on fact whatsoever. I think that after Pocahontas underperformed both critically and financially, they decided to make Hercules a lot lighter to contrast the criticisms that they were receiving against that film, especially since Hunchback was too deep in production to change the script for it. Some tweaks were made, and then they decided to go full on out to try and draft away from all the heavy features from The Lion King to Hunchback. Mulan was being worked on in 1993 down at the Florida studio, which was being used previously for shorts and featurettes. Apparently, the studio was allowed to work on their own independent film after helping with Beauty and the Beast and The Lion King. A bit beforehand, there are two shorts that are being worked on, one called China Doll, which is about an oppressed girl being whisked and romanced by a European man, and another one based on the song of Fa Mulan. These projects were combined together to start off with the very early draft of Mulan, which consisted of another arranged marriage, with the father carving out her fate and arrangement in stone, which Mulan angrily breaks and runs off to avoid this fate. Chris Sanders did not like the romantic comedy aspect of the film, and wanted the film to be closer to the original legend. I'm glad this happened, because it would have made Mulan a lot more like Pocahontas and Jasmine, and we did not need another rehash of that part and arc. They changed Mulan's character to be more appealing and selfless. I'm not sure when this happened, but apparently Roy Disney told the directors to include Mushu into the story, and Michael Eisner told the directors to include Turkey in the story for more comedic relief. There are no animal fighting pigs in the earlier drafts, but they are demanded to be included. As you can see, a lot of things with these two films were being changed and retooled based off the reception of the earlier films and to follow a certain formula. Hercules was changed from something that was not that serious, and Mulan was changed to be a film that was more subdued and less princessy. Pocahontas and Hunchback were obviously released in 1995 and 1996, and it is important to note these dates and when the films after Mulan went into development. When Pocahontas was released, it was seen as a disappointment compared to its predecessors, though Michael Eisner stated in January 1986 that it has become one of the most successful films, equaling Beauty and the Beast in the box office and doing well regarding its merchandise sales. People complained about the wrong choice of adaptation, the poor representation of Native Americans, claiming that the story and characters are uninspired, despite the music and animation flourishing. Many saw this film as fifth compared to the other big four in the era. Despite many feeling like it was less than stellar, it was nominated and won countless awards for the studio, pretty much the exact same amount of awards that the other four won. Its soundtrack also topped the Billboard 200, and the single Colors of the Wind ended up at number 4 on the Billboard Hot 100 chart. When The Hunchback of Notre Dame was released in 1996, there were reports of it not only underperforming compared to the Big Four, but also to Pocahontas. Despite that, it still performed well, but just a bit less than Pocahontas. Apparently fans liked the film when it premiered in early 1997, and overall, there was a lot more positive reviews and thoughts about the film, despite others not liking it for its unfaithful adaptation of the book, disparaging the values of Christianity, and claiming it to be too dark and scary for children. It underperformed when it came to the awards, even compared to Pocahontas. It was nominated for many awards, but it was not winning the awards like they were previously. It was even nominated for a Razzie, though the category it was nominated for only existed for that year. Its soundtrack peaked at number 11 on the Billboard 200 chart. From a production standpoint, 1996 was the year that the Renaissance ended, but when it came to the released films, it was not until much later. Approximately months or weeks before Katzenberg left the studio in 1994, he approached a goofy movie director Kevin Lima to produce Tarzan at the Canadian studio, but he declined at the time. After Katzenberg left, Eisner approached him again to do it at the feature animation studio in Burbank, which he accepted. What's interesting is that many of the people who worked on the films, Pocahontas and Hunchback, were instantly brought over to work on Tarzan. In early 1987, after Hunchback was leaving the theaters, Bob Sudeikis and Noni White, which were husband and wife, were hired to add humor into the film and for rewriting purposes. So this pretty much reinforces that a lot of changes were made when it comes to the humor and lightness after reception of Pocahontas and Hunchback in these later films, though they still kept some of the creativity and the formula that they were working with. There really isn't much to say about Fantasia 2000, other than the fact that they were working on it for the entirety of the 1990s, and production started in 1991. Remember me stating that the official renaissance in the studio ended in 1986? The reason for this results in the fact that the new projects that the studio was working on were about bringing the preteen boys in and kicking out the formula that they've been stuck with for the last decade out. The Emperor's New Groove was supposed to be a huge production which is based off the story The Kingdom of the Sun, and Eisner approved the project because Alice had a recent huge hit with The Lion King. In early 1997, director Mark Dindal was contacted to join the project, during the film having the underperformance of Hunchback, and told to add as much humor as he can to the film. As we know, there was a complete overhaul, and the film had to be restarted from scratch in 1998. And the film became all about the humor and lost any of the big, huge, grand Renaissance style it had in the early drafts. Atlantis, The Lost Empire in general, was in a completely different avenue from any Disney project, especially of the Renaissance. It was conceived in late 1986, and the Hunchback crew were recruited to stay together for this project. The film was the first since The Rescuers Down Under to not have any songs, and the crew wanted to build on any of the mistakes they made with Hunchback. Hercules was released in 1987, receiving mixed to positive reviews at the time, though it made less money than Hunchback and Pocahontas. It did not win awards, and it still received a lot of controversy. Many consider this to be the worst of the Renaissance era, and Walt killed it for them. Mulan did a lot better in theaters during 1998, making more money than Hercules and receiving better reception than all three prior films. Many considered this film to be a resurgence from the last 3 years. While things were not as well as they were in the first half of the 90s, things seemed like they were going upwards. Tarzan was a completely different story. It made tons more than all 4 films beforehand, and even outgrossed Beauty and the Beast in the box office. It opened to strong reviews and won more awards than the 3 prior films. Countless of the songs were doing well on the charts, and its album peaked at number 5. It was like they were returning to the times of Lion King and Pocahontas regarding awards. Neither Mulan or Tarzan followed the formula fully, but the strong stories, characters, and the technique remained the same. The few modifications they made seemed to have worked,